Well, good evening, guys. It's Sunday night again, and welcome, believe it or not, to the next to last week of the course, and therefore the next to last Sunday night sports economics rant, if you will. But I don't think it's going to be too much of a rant tonight. It's going to be a very, very busy week, and as much as anything, I want to spend the time on going through with you what we're going to be doing this week, what we're going to be looking at, setting up the final exam, and also talking about another assessment piece that we need to get done. So there's an awful lot to go through tonight. So really, thank you for taking the time to listen to me and to understand where we're going with a whole bunch of things. Last week, week 6, we spent time on the labor market and looking at some of the components that we thought were relevant in developing some of those very, very large salaries that we see people collecting, and it's almost mind-boggling the changes that have gone on in the last probably 40 years is when I can say it. I often tell people a story that back when I was in the late 70s or so, and I was still in the corporate world, I read a feature article about the life of a minimum salary major league ball player, and they happened to profile the backup catcher for the Boston Red Sox. I believe it was Rick Cerone at the time, but no matter who it was, I was so proud of myself at the reading at the end of that article and realized that year I was going to earn more in terms of current dollars, present day dollars, real dollars back then, uh, than the major league minimum. Wow, has that changed? I mean, that has gone right out the window. The salary escalation in sport has been amazing, and when we look at the labor market and we look at what's there and we look how things have run in that last 40 years, it's just been almost, as I said, mind-boggling change. And I'm very interested in the comments that some of you have had, and it's going to be interesting reading, finishing those up. Okay, this week, like I said, busy week. Why is this so important? Well, we're going to spend the time this week on a couple of concepts, but mostly we've been talking about professional sport, and now it's time for us to talk about amateur sport, and to a large degree, college sport. And one of the big developments also in the last 40 years or so in college sport, you'll see I've included a lot of material on Title IX. Now, most of us have at least a rough knowledge of what Title IX is, but Title IX is the federal educational law from the 70s that mandated equality of opportunity in essentially all things in any university, any college that accepted federal funds. Most of us have heard it in the case of sports, and we look at Title IX is that legislative piece that really launched women's sports into the prominence that they have today. Opportunities for women in sport in colleges and to a large degree high schools, and to some degree professional sport because of the development in colleges and high schools just wasn't there in the 70s and the 60s. And now we take it for granted. And we look at sports programs built around equal numbers or equal opportunities for women and men in college sports. And it's caused an awful lot of changes. So you're going to see an argument from some proponents of Title IX and what it's meant. You're going to see a pretty, I think, passionate argument from somebody who thinks that their men's program was hurt by Title IX. Do you think it's fair or unfair? That's what the discussion will be about this week. But I don't want you to lose sight of the other things that have gone on in college sports, and it's almost too difficult to keep up with the developments. In the last few years we've seen conference realignment. Now we have this concept within the NCAA of what the Power Five conferences, and how are they going to be allowed to have a little bit more autonomy, a little bit more of their own governance procedures, so they have more of a say in what happens to them. Are they going to be able to set the tone for the rest of the NCAA? Are they going to be able to break away? Are they going to feel that need? It's going to be very interesting. almost to the point where you don't know what to say next. We went through an interesting last 2 or 3 years, maybe 5 years to 10 years, where we almost could pick up the sports news any day and find a major college switching conferences to the point where we didn't know who was playing who anymore. And it's all starting to shake out now. We have the new college football playoff. That's going to be interesting economically in sports. So much going on. But I'd like you to look back about, not quite a year. I'd like you to consider some things this week. Read up on the Northwestern labor agreement. Remember last spring when football players at Northwestern University won the right to organize as a union. And of course that's under appeal, and we'll see how that happens. But there are a ton of considerations there. How amateur is amateur sport? This is all material that we need to be very aware of because it's going to play into a lot of our thinking. Okay? So start this week with Title IX. Next week we're going to be wrapping up with more material on amateur sport and its structure. The two things that I really need you to pay attention to this week are both in the unit. And number one, I've provided an introduction for the final exam. And the introduction may sound like I'm trying to throw you a curveball, like I'm just suddenly sneaking up with an entirely different perspective. But I don't think we're doing that. I think we're doing something a little different. I have not tried it before, so you guys are the guinea pigs, if you will. But the assignment for the final exam is going to be a little different this time. And what I'd like you to do is read it carefully. What I've asked you to do is project yourself into a very, very interesting role. You know, we've looked at just about everything in the context of American professional sport. And then I've just talked about how we're introducing American amateur sport. But we all know the sports world is exactly that. It's global. It is involving the whole world. And you look at events like we've just witnessed the World Cup in soccer. Right now, as we speak, we're finishing up the Women's World Championships in basketball. This summer we had the Men's World Championships, and that's now called the World Cup. We have international events all the time. We see sport as a political statement in some cases. We're all used to watching the Olympics. So what I've asked you to do is an assignment I think that's going to allow you to take everything we've learned about the structure of sports and the economic concepts that come into sports and to apply them in a very imaginative way. And it's very simply this. I've asked you to imagine yourself as a very, very high-level consultant, the world's foremost authority, if you will. And you have been engaged by the Ministry of Sport in a developing country to propose a sport system that's going to help that country develop economically and culturally. What would you propose? What kind of sports would you propose? What league structures would you propose? How would you propose that these fit into the fabric of that country? You can choose, if you'd like, I can come up with a list of, say, several suggestions, but when I say a developing country, I'm not talking about any established country like the U.S. or one of the European countries or, the UK or France or something like that. I might conclude China, okay? I might include India, some of the African nations like Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa. I consider that industrialized, but it's would be a good candidate. A huge population country like Indonesia, something like that, and I'll try to put together a list for everyone. But if you were going to establish a sports structure in that country, what would it look like? I've laid out some of the questions for you, some of the ideas I'd like you to consider, and how you can use everything we've talked about to kind of knit together a plan. I really want you to start thinking about that this week, because of course next week is when you're going to be working on it, and when will it be due? It'll be due a week from this coming Saturday, which is when the course ends. So I think it's going to be a challenge. I think it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be a chance for you to use your imagination as well as your knowledge, and it's going to be very important to us. The other thing you see at the end of this week is something called the CPC assessment. And you might say, good heavens, what is this? Well, in the practice we use with our accreditors, one of the things we do is we look at the success of the university's programs over time. So this is not so much an assessment of you as a student, this is an assessment of us as a university. How well are you doing things? And you'll see a section on the CPC assessment giving you some very specific instructions. This is not a graded assignment. It will not affect your grade one bit. However, it is mandatory. I need you to do this. And it's something that we really need you to do because it helps all of us get better. And it's going to go back and look at every component you've had across your business degree here at Post. And you say business degree, remember, sport management is a business degree. There are going to be sections on marketing, accounting, ethics, all of those things. Don't worry about your score. As I said, this is not an assessment of you. It is an assessment of us to see how well we're doing and how we are bringing our students up to par with their abilities in all of these common professional competency areas. So the instructions are there for you. They're very simple. The time it takes you to do the test should not be that long, but generally I think it should take you about 45 minutes to an hour. All right, but I need you to devote the time to that. It's very important, as I said, to us as a university, and it will not affect your grade, but it's a mandatory assignment. So all in all, this is going to be a very busy week. You got the discussion board as usual. You have the CPC assessment. You have the chance to start drafting and collecting ideas for your final exam, all while you're considering these ideas of amateur sport and collegiate sport. So take a look at the material. This is the big week for asking questions. I'll be looking at things more frequently because I realize, like I said, I've thrown a bit of a curveball with the change into the global perspective assignment, but it's something I think I really want to try. I think you'll have fun with. Okay, so if there are any questions, of course, contact me, and I look forward to having a really successful week. Thanks.